How do you turn a regional war into World War III? You create an invisible network of military and financial support that connects nuclear-armed nations across continents. Since February 2022, the United States has committed over $118 billion to Ukraine, including advanced Patriot missile systems and battle tanks. But here's what most people don't see. Russia has responded by becoming North Korea's primary nuclear financier, providing technology, commodities, and cash to sustain Pyongyang's weapons program. This shadow economy is the unseen hand pushing us toward a global confrontation that could involve multiple nuclear powers simultaneously. To understand how we reach this dangerous threshold, we need to examine the mechanisms driving this escalation. The $118 billion escalation machine. The $118 billion commitment represents more than financial support. It signals a complete transformation of how modern warfare operates when superpowers become directly involved. Since February 2022, the United States has allocated over $118 billion in aid packages, including advanced Patriot air defense systems, M1 Abrams battle tanks, and high-mobility artillery rocket systems. These numbers reveal the staggering scale of American commitment to Ukraine. This aid package creates direct operational integration between NATO and Ukrainian forces that extends far beyond simple weapons transfers. The U.S. military has established sophisticated logistics networks across Eastern Europe to maintain the flow of precision-guided munitions, artillery shells, and replacement parts. Ukrainian soldiers now train on American soil at facilities in Oklahoma and Germany, learning to operate complex weapon systems that require ongoing technical support from U.S. contractors and military personnel. The Pentagon has created dedicated task forces to coordinate real-time intelligence sharing, providing Ukrainian commanders with satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and battlefield assessments that would normally be restricted to NATO allies. The scale of this military infrastructure becomes clear when you examine the surge in U.S. troop presence across Europe. American forces in the region have increased from approximately 60,000 soldiers in early 2022 to over 100,000 by late 2023. These troops operate from bases in Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states, creating a military network that extends far beyond Ukraine's borders. The 101st Airborne Division deployed to Romania for the first time since World War II, positioning combat-ready forces within 100 miles of the Ukrainian border. Training Ukrainian forces on NATO standard equipment creates irreversible military dependencies that transform the conflict's strategic nature. Ukrainian maintenance crews must learn American technical procedures for repairing Bradley fighting vehicles and Patriot missile batteries. Communication systems now operate on NATO frequencies and encryption protocols. Ukrainian pilots train on F-16 fighter jets using American flight manuals and weapons systems. This standardization process means Ukrainian forces can no longer operate effectively without continued American technical support, spare parts, and ammunition supplies. The operational commitments extend beyond equipment to integrated command structures. American military advisors coordinate with Ukrainian general staff to plan offensive operations. U.S. intelligence agencies provide targeting data for Ukrainian strikes against Russian positions. American satellites guide Ukrainian drones and missiles to their targets. These activities represent direct participation in combat operations, even without American troops on the front lines. This massive aid program has transformed Ukraine from a regional conflict into a direct NATO-Russia proxy war through institutional mechanisms that create permanent military relationships. Russia has observed this transformation and recognized that NATO's unprecedented military integration with Ukraine requires a strategic counter-response. Moscow has accelerated partnerships with nuclear-armed states, creating financial and military support systems that operate in the shadows of international oversight. Russia's nuclear financing network. The most dangerous aspect of this partnership lies in how Russia funds North Korea's nuclear weapons program through sophisticated methods that operate beyond traditional oversight mechanisms. Russia has systematically violated UN Security Council resolutions by transferring technology, commodities, and cash to sustain Pyongyang's weapons development. This partnership represents one of the most significant threats to global nuclear non-proliferation efforts since the Cold War. In April 2024, Russia demonstrated its commitment to this shadow network by withdrawing support from the UN panel of experts on North Korean sanctions. This panel had served as the primary source of evidence regarding North Korea's violations of UN Security Council resolutions and its illicit proliferation financing network. Russia's withdrawal effectively eliminated international oversight of sanctions violations, creating space for expanded cooperation with Pyongyang. The timing was strategic, occurring as Russia needed additional military supplies for its ongoing war in Ukraine. The UK, South Korea, the US, and other allies responded by establishing the Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Team to replace the lost UN expertise. The MSMT's first report, released in June 2024, directly implicated Moscow in financing North Korea's nuclear program, highlighting Russia's transformation from what the report called gamekeeper to poacher. The report's findings reveal the extensive scale of violations that had previously operated under the radar of international monitoring systems. Russia has become North Korea's primary nuclear financier through multiple channels that provide critical resources for weapons production. Since January 2024, Russia has facilitated the transfer of arms and related materials via sea, air, and rail routes. These transfers include artillery systems, ballistic missiles, and combat vehicles moving from North Korea to Russia for use against Ukraine. The arrangement creates a circular financing system where North Korean weapons sales fund additional nuclear development while Russia receives needed military equipment. The technology transfers flow in both directions, with Russia providing North Korea access to advanced missile guidance systems and uranium enrichment capabilities. Russian engineers have shared technical expertise for improving North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile program. North Korean technicians receive training on Russian air defense systems that Russia has provided to enhance Pyongyang's defensive capabilities. This technical cooperation accelerates North Korea's nuclear timeline by providing access to sophisticated technologies that would otherwise require decades of independent development. This relationship violates Financial Action Task Force standards and international proliferation financing laws designed to prevent nuclear weapons development. The FATF has blacklisted North Korea, indicating that the country poses significant danger to the international financial system. Russia's support represents a direct contravention of both UN Security Council resolutions and FATF requirements that mandate countries implement financial safeguards to counter proliferation financing. Russia has essentially created a nuclear weapons assembly line funded by a major world power, representing an unprecedented violation of international non-proliferation frameworks. This shadow partnership operates through financial mechanisms that bypass traditional banking systems and sanctions regimes, creating new pathways for illicit nuclear financing. The sanctions backdoor system. The most sophisticated element of this operation involves Russia's creation of a financial backdoor system that allows North Korean banks to access international markets through mechanisms that completely escape traditional oversight. Russia has established correspondent banking relationships that enable North Korean banks to clear transactions using Russian rubles, effectively shielding North Korea from the international financial system and circumventing the SWIFT messaging network that has restricted North Korea's cross-border activities for years. The specific mechanism involves Russian banks providing clearing services for North Korean financial institutions through ruble-denominated accounts. North Korean banks process international transactions by converting foreign currencies to rubles, conducting business through Russian correspondent banks, then converting back to their desired currencies. This creates multiple layers of separation between North Korean entities and the international banking system, making detection extremely difficult for sanctions monitoring agencies. Banking facilities in occupied Georgian territories like South Ossetia provide additional operational security for these transactions. These territories operate outside international banking oversight while maintaining connections to Russian financial networks. South Ossetian banks process transactions for North Korean entities without triggering compliance systems that major international banks use to detect sanctions violations. The geographic separation creates plausible deniability while enabling massive sanctions violations through seemingly legitimate regional banking operations. This system undermines the entire international sanctions regime by creating alternative financial pathways that bypass traditional monitoring mechanisms. The Financial Action Task Force requires countries to implement financial safeguards to counter proliferation financing, but Russia's actions directly contravene these standards. The ruble-based clearing system allows North Korea to purchase critical materials and technologies for weapons development without triggering financial controls that banks typically use to detect prohibited transactions. The flow of funds through this network enables North Korea to access international markets for dual-use technologies, specialized manufacturing equipment, and raw materials needed for nuclear weapons production. North Korean purchasing agents operate through Russian shell companies and intermediaries, making their transactions appear as legitimate commercial activities between Russian entities and international suppliers. These purchases include precision machinery for uranium enrichment, electronic components for missile guidance systems, and specialized alloys for nuclear weapons construction. The financial network extends beyond North Korea to facilitate transactions for Iranian entities, Syrian government institutions, and other sanctioned organizations through similar ruble-based mechanisms. This expansion demonstrates how Russia has weaponized its financial system to enable sanctions evasion on a global scale, creating exposure to proliferation financing that affects the entire international banking system. Russia has transformed from a partner in international sanctions enforcement to an active facilitator of sanctions evasion, establishing financial infrastructure that connects multiple nuclear-armed states in ways that traditional security frameworks never anticipated. The nuclear domino effect. These financial pathways enable something far more dangerous: coordinated military cooperation between nuclear-armed nations during an active conflict. When nuclear-capable states start forming military alliances while European warfare is ongoing, the mathematics of global confrontation change completely. The Ukraine conflict has created unprecedented cooperation between Russia, North Korea, and Iran that transforms how military strategists calculate risk and response scenarios across multiple theaters simultaneously. North Korean missiles are now being used in European warfare, while Russian nuclear technology flows to Asia, creating operational interdependence that connects continents through active combat operations. Russian forces have deployed North Korean KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles against Ukrainian positions, marking the first combat use of North Korean weapons in Europe since the Korean War. These missiles carry guidance systems that incorporate Russian technical improvements, demonstrating how military cooperation produces hybrid weapons systems that combine technologies from multiple nuclear powers. Intelligence sharing agreements and real-time battlefield feedback create operational interdependence that extends far beyond simple arms transfers. Russian military advisors coordinate with North Korean weapons manufacturers to modify missile systems for specific battlefield conditions in Ukraine. North Korean engineers receive performance data from Russian forces about weapon effectiveness, enabling rapid improvements to guidance systems and warhead designs. This feedback loop accelerates weapons development cycles that would normally require years of independent testing. Iran has joined this network, creating a triangle of nuclear-capable states supporting Russia through coordinated military and technological cooperation. Iranian Shahed drones operate alongside North Korean missiles in Russian military operations, while Iranian technical specialists work with Russian engineers to improve drone manufacturing capabilities. Iran provides Russia with drone production facilities and expertise, while Russia shares advanced air defense technologies and nuclear knowledge with Tehran. This triangular cooperation creates redundant supply chains that make the alliance resilient to international pressure. This alliance structure forces NATO into potential simultaneous confrontations across multiple theaters, stretching Western military resources and diplomatic attention. A military response to Russian aggression in Ukraine could trigger coordinated retaliation for North Korea in the Pacific and Iran in the Middle East. NATO commanders must now plan for scenarios where military action in one theater automatically activates responses from nuclear powers on 3 continents. North Korea's nuclear doctrine, codified in September 2022 law, states that nuclear attacks against enemies would be launched automatically if the top leadership or nuclear command system faces attack. This automatic response system connects North Korean nuclear decision-making to Russian military operations, creating scenarios where events in Ukraine could prompt nuclear responses in Asia. Traditional deterrence models assume bilateral nuclear confrontations between superpowers. The current alliance structure creates multiple decision-makers with independent nuclear capabilities who coordinate responses through shared intelligence and military planning. These partnerships have transformed what began as a regional conflict into a global threat involving nuclear powers across 3 continents, each with capabilities to escalate through coordinated responses that operate through established networks. Conclusion: the unseen hand isn't pushing us toward World War III. It's already building the infrastructure for it, one financial transaction and weapons transfer at a time. You've witnessed how $118 billion in military aid transforms regional conflicts into global proxy wars through direct operational integration between NATO and Ukrainian forces. You've seen how Russia finances nuclear proliferation through ruble-based banking systems that bypass international oversight, creating shadow financial networks that connect sanctioned regimes across continents. You've observed how coordinated military cooperation between nuclear-armed nations creates operational interdependence that forces potential simultaneous confrontations across multiple theaters. By combining vast U.S. aid with Russia's illicit nuclear financing, the conflict's footprint has become global. The next global conflict won't begin with declarations of war, but with alliance activation. If this unseen network concerns you, subscribe to stay informed on how these hidden alliances shape global security.